Alright YouTubes, in today's video we're going to be doing some panel work. So the repair we've got to do is on a Vauxhall Vivaro van. And it's quite nasty, it's not too nice. Repair on this side panel, a little bit on the door, and a bit of a nasty ding at the top here. So quite often on commercial vehicles, panels are big obviously, and when they get hit they're normally quite substantial, and quite often you could do with getting on the inside. And being a commercial vehicle, quite often there's all paneling on the inside and racking and all stuff like that, so it makes it almost impossible, unless you're going to strip it all out, it makes it almost impossible to get on the insides of panels. So you really need a dent puller to try and do it all from the outside, and you want to try and keep your filler to a minimum really. So it's always worth spending that extra bit of time just getting your metal as best you can, you know, not metal finishing it, but keeping your filler to a minimum and keeping the amount of times you have to put filler in to a minimum. So it's always better to spend more time trying to get the metal right. And like I say, if you've got no access to the inside, which is quite a common theme with commercials, this one's not too bad. We could do it if we wanted to. There's no racking, but there's ply in here, and it's not fully loaded with tools, but that's normally the case when you do commercials. It's a working van, they're full of tools, full of racking and all stuff like that, so you're not going to be able to get on the inside. So you need a good dent puller. I say good dent puller, you don't need to spend a lot of money on one, to be honest with you. I've got a GYS dent puller, and it's got a variation of attachments. It's a bit of an older machine. There's newer versions of that out now, but you don't need to even go to that extreme. Quite often you can just use you know, the cheaper ones that maybe only have one or two attachments. I think the most essential attachments are the ones that will do wiggly wire, and they just got the puller end on the slide hammer, bit like this one. So a slide hammer, it's got the attachment there for spot pulling. Spot pullers like will do the majority of stuff that you need it to do. So handy to have the one that will put wiggly wire on, which is just a different attachment for the gun to weld that on, because you can curve it and put it, like on this, you can put it round the feature line and pull all at once. So you would need, you know, a good slide hammer with the attachment to get hold of the wiggly wire and the spot puller, and that will do it. And you can buy them cheap for DIY. They're not too expensive, you know. That's sort of a bit more of a pro level one, the GYS, bit more expensive, but there are far cheaper versions out there, especially if you're only doing it part-time or you're not going to be using that often. A cheap version will be fine. So I'll just walk you through the repairing of this. I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to start with the deepest part first, get that out, and then when I've got that out, it's a bit crowned here. What I do is I'll get the wiggly wire attachment across that wheel arch, so I can bend it round, get it under tension, and with that under tension start tapping that crown down. Get the metal as best as I can without spending like a massive amount of time. You could be there for ages and ages trying to get that metal perfect, which is great if you can metal finish it, but in a production shop, and you know, with times that you've quoted for, or times that are allocated for repair times, and doing it for yourself, you want to try and strike a balance between how long you spend repairing it really. Another thing that's handy as well with pulling from the outside is it will reduce the amount of stripping you have to do, which will save you time. So that, you know, that it's a no-brainer really. They're really worth their weight in gold for doing quick, efficient, clean repairs. So first thing I want to do is obviously get this to bare metal. I've cleaned down all the panel, get all that paint off, but I don't want to really take any metal away, especially on commercial vehicles. You want to get that paint off without really taking the metal off, but you do want to get the galvanized off it. So I just use like the plastic fiber wheels, or you know, the plastic, if you've just got a grinder, I use the roll up 3M ones, combination of those, and a grinder with like the plastic coated stripper wheels, which will take the paint off quite efficiently, but will not really touch the metal too much, just get it really clean. But you want to get that galvanized coating off, and you'll be able to see there's a slight color change when the galvanized comes off, and that's where you want it. You don't want to hit it with anything too coarse on a grinder, like, you know, like 36 grit or something like that, because you're going to be linishing the metal off, and then that's going to have a bit of a detrimental effect when you try to pull it, because you're going to be grinding it after you've pulled it, and you're taking even more metal off. It makes the metal a bit thinner, makes it harder to work with. So initially, for the first initial pulls, you just want to get the paint off and keep as much metal material on there as possible. Especially on some of these commercial vehicles, the metal can be quite thin and flimsy, and there's a chance, you know, you're going to overstretch it, and that's going to cause you problems. You're going to have to try and heat shrink it. May have to try and do a bit of heat shrinking on this, to be honest with you. The panels are big, they flex quite a lot on commercials, so that's another thing you need to consider as well. You don't need a massive amount of equipment or expensive equipment to achieve a repair on quite a substantial bit of damage. You can do it quite cheaply, really, without, you know, you can keep going and going with any equipment, buying the best, and it will make your job easier. Obviously, the better the equipment, but you know, for something that's relatively cheap, maybe for a couple of £100, you could do, you know, some quite substantial panel work without spending a massive amount of money. So I'll get the machine set up, and we go through all the stages of pulling this out and then putting filler in it, getting it all shaped, and get it up to ready for primer stage.
Alright YouTubes, how we all doing? Hope you're all well. So initially, obviously, like I said in the intro, want to get some paint off it to start pulling it. So I don't like to take the paint off completely over the whole bit of damage. I like to leave a bit of paint on there, so I can see what's happening around where I'm pulling. So on this one, I've started with the deepest part, get that to bare metal. And like the subject, the title of this video, is about how you feel repairs, because once you've got paint off it and you haven't got shine on there, you're quite limited to what you can see visually. So it's about training your hand, and it takes time. The key to any repair, a successful repair, is how it feels in filler, how the primer feels, how the paint transitions feel. It's the most essential part to me. It takes time and experience to train your hand to see. Basically, that's what it is. Your hand will see how that final paint job at the end is going to look, and it takes time to train your hand. I know it sounds silly, but I can visualize with my hand how that repair is going to look. You can see profiles and you can see feature lines and all that, and no one ever seems to mention this. They always talk about stuff feeling smooth, and it's got nothing to do with smoothness. It's about feeling level. And I'm right-handed, so I block with my right hand most of the time, unless it's an awkward position, then I will use my left. But you know, any of my block work is done with my right hand, so there's always a block in my right hand. So all my feel work, how I feel levels and transitions of paint, transitions of filler, transitions of primer, whatever it is, nibs, is all done with my left hand. If I use my right hand, I can't really feel any small discrepancies, but I can definitely feel it with my left hand. Even when I look at repairs that people might send me photos and all the rest of it, yeah, I can see a bulk of damage and all the rest of it, but I need to run my hand over it. It's so essential. And like I say, it's not about feeling smooth. You could have a filler repair and you've rubbed it down in 80 grit, 80 grit doesn't feel smooth. It's not about that. It's about feeling the level and feeling the shape. Yeah, like I say, you can see profile shapes and stuff like that, and guide coat will show you lows and stuff like that, but guide coat can miss a low or a wobble in a repair or in a panel, in metalwork. I'm constantly, everything I do, you can see with the metalwork, I do a few pulls and I'm rubbing it, I'm feeling it, I'm feeling whether I pulled that up too high. And it's not something you can sort of teach somebody. It's, again, a lot with this job, with painting, repairing, panel beating and all the rest of it, it's a lot of trial and error. So over the years, I've felt, trying to train my hand to feel my hand, you need your hand dead straight when you're going across something that you want to feel straight, and you've got to try and feel wobbles in it. And I never used to be able to feel, in the early days, I wouldn't be able to feel it, but then I'd look down a job or whatever and I'd be like, how did I miss that? And it just takes time to train your hand. And I have heard, people say, make sure it feels really smooth. And to me, it's got nothing to do with smoothness. It's about feeling levels and feeling lines. And even with primer, it can be such small margins of transitions between paint and primer and filler and primer. If you feel anything with your hand, any misshape, any wobble, any transition, if you can feel it with your hand, then you're definitely going to see it. In a perfect world, everything should be completely dead flat. Every shape should be absolutely perfect. And it's not going to be. So you've got to find a balance and draw a fine line where you might be able to feel a small discrepancy somewhere, and weigh it up with how that's going to look. To the average person, it might be something that someone does, will not notice. But you can feel brand new panels, especially in production cars. You can feel brand new panels, and you can feel a slight wobble in them. Around sort of door handle recesses on a lot of vehicles, you can feel that the panel dips in on the pressing and it's got pressing marks, and you can feel that. So we're not looking for total perfection glass, unless it's a different type of work, like restoration and custom. With those types of jobs, then you're shaping a car out of filler. That's how it is in restoration. You're shaping that car by hand out of filler, so you'll be making gaps with filler. You'll be shaping the feature lines. Everything will be made out of filler on a restoration job. I've seen them and I've worked on them enough times to know that you basically shape that car out of filler. So once you're getting filler in there, you're not going to see any discrepancies in the filler work itself. Unless you're putting, a semi-gloss primer on there or something, you're going to start seeing stuff like that. And sometimes you will have to do that. So, like I say, it's really essential. It just seems to me a subject that's not ever really talked about. It's about how it feels in your hand. So a key thing to learn when you're trying to repair stuff for yourself, if you're a DIYer, is just keep feeling it. I'm constantly feeling everything I do all the time. I rub a bit, I feel. I pull a bit, I feel. I sand a bit, I feel. It's all about the feeling you can get in your hand, and it takes time for your hand to pick it up. And then with that, once you're sort of there with it and your hand's sensitive to it, and it's something I'm trying to show Reese at the moment, and he's learning, but I get him to feel it. He'd do a repair for me, and he's coming on great. It's absolutely fantastic. And he'd do a repair, and I'll run my hand over it straight away, and I'll go, oh, there's a bit there, and I try to show him where I can feel a discrepancy in something he's repaired. I then get him to keep feeling it and get him to see if he can pick that up with his hand,
now it's ground off, so we've pulled the majority of this out. It's like tin foil, which I expected. Being a commercial vehicle, obviously for lightness, so the metals, and you know, a lot of these vans is cheaper metal that are used on them as well, so they're never as solid. But so we've taken care of most of this creasing through here, and it's just gentle little pulls. You don't need to be smacking it out or putting any pressure. Literally a little tap or a little couple of taps, and then twist it off and move on, and just do it gradually. I'll do about 1 centimetre at a time, and then quite often I'll go in between each pull that I've done, just to even it up a bit more. But you want to keep it in a little bit, so constantly feeling. Every time I pull, every couple of pulls I have a feel, and you can see the metal like there, I've pulled it too far, so it's overstretched. So I've got to try and get that back in now, and then hitting that back in is going to then put all the work that I've done pulling the majority of it out. It's got a risk of it just all going back in where I've got such a high spot. But I will grind it off first. Just do all the grinding at the end and see where you are. A bit more pulling maybe, and you know, tapping about. But I pulled on that one there to get this high spot down, so I got it under tension, so I'm not just smacking the metal. I'm holding the metal out while I'm hitting that in. Still up a little bit, but I'm going to get this arch now, just trying to work my way around relieving tension. And where I've ground it off, you can see the feature line of it. You get a scriber and a pen or whatever, and put that line in, which I'm going to do. And then at the moment, to me, it looks like, if you can see there, the feature line's pretty much there. It was in here, but I've gone across this with the spot puller. So I'm just going to wire. It's definitely in here. I can feel it. So it's all about feeling, especially once you're taking the paint off. And I tried to leave as much paint on and work my way around the dent, so I can see what's happening around. I still got reflection off of the paint, so I don't want to just bare metal the whole area in one go, because I'll lose visually. I'll lose how the rest of the panel's shaping. So just do a bit at a time. So like I say, worked my way through this, got some tension out of this. This is really springy. Let me get the tension out of this, see where I'm at when I've got the tension out of this. So just wiggly wire this part of it. I'm just going to do from about here to here. This is like the lowest point at the moment, and I just want to try and grab it all at once and tap this crown down. And then that's gonna, this is in a little bit, this is got tension going outwards. Try and release that tension out of it. Once I release that tension out, I see how the rest of the arch feels, and then maybe go back to the spot puller and start pulling some individual areas. Get the shrinking hammer on it, and use the flipper on it that helps shrink it down. And then when I think I'm almost there level wise, I'm gonna see where it's flexing and stretched. Get it all bare metaled, and then probably do a bit of heat shrinking. Again, once you want to do the heat shrinking when it's relaxed, you don't want to heat shrink it in or you know, under tension. So heat shrink it when it's relaxed. Quite often that might shrivel it back in, it might pull the dent back in a little way, but then the metal's got a bit more strength in it, it's a bit tighter, and then you can start manipulating back out again. So it's a bit of a combination of all of that really. So let's get the wiggly wire on this arch, see how that pulls out, and then we'll carry on from there. Make sure you wear goggles. First time I've worn them on the channel. Don't want the health and safety police commenting, do we? So the thinner the metal, the lower the temperature is how I work on this machine. So I set it at about 2 or 3 on metal like this. The trouble is, if you weld too strongly on it, it's got a tendency to pull in high spots more, and you've got the risk of ripping holes as well. It's inevitable. It can, you know, it can happen. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but a bit less heat as long as it's on there. This isn't like, you know, major heavily damaged that I'm trying to pull strength wise. It's a flimsy old panel at the end of the day, so I just need to get some tension out of it. So I've got my little scriber tool or profile marker, whatever you you call it? I don't even know what to call it. So I've set the distance, because it's a bit flattened in here and a bit deformed. I've set this from the wheel arch on the other side, so I know that's got more of a detailed, finer line on there, so I can be a bit more accurate with this. So I've set it where I need it height-wise off the bottom of this arch from the wheel arch on the other side. And I've also swapped out the pencil for a marker pen, because I was struggling to see the line.
So like I say, it is a hard thing to teach, but the only way I've sort of can try and teach Reese is for me to point out what I can feel and get him to keep trying to feel it himself. And he is, we'd do stuff, he doesn't feel it as much as I do. And then I say, oh, it's a bit low there, or I can feel a bit of a lump at the edge of that, or whatever. And then I keep getting him to feel it. And he has a tendency to arch his hand and use his fingertips, where you've got to use the whole palm of your hand from the tips of your fingers right to your wrist, and you know, get it dead flat across it. And I sort of show him what shape to put his hand over it, and then I say, can you feel that? Can you feel that? And he's like, oh yeah, I can feel that now. So that's the only way I can really teach him how, you know, to train his hand how to see, basically. And that, to me, that is the most essential part of this trade. With repairing, you know, if you're painting stuff, it's had repairs, obviously. There's been damage, you know, unless it's just brand new panels and you're colour changing or whatever. To me, it is the most important part of this job for a successful, you know, good looking repair and a good paint job is in how that repair feels and how all that preparation feels. Anything above 320 grit, something like that, it feels smooth. So, you know, you can run your hand over a panel that's been sanded with 800 grit and 320 grit, and you know, they all feel smooth. So it's not about smoothness, it's about feeling levels and feeling shapes. And once your hand's sensitive to that, and you can feel minor discrepancies, when you feel something, straight away you know in your mind how that's going to look with paint on it when it's finished. I've done restoration jobs where we filled a whole car, shaped a whole car out of filler, and spend just as much time feeling it with your hand as you do rubbing the filler down. So it just takes time to get sensitive to it, and just keep concentrating on what you can feel and try and visualize what you can feel.
So I need to try and put a bit of tension into this now to stop this from happening. So I'm going to just put some pressure on it, pulling out, and use the shrinking hammer and the flipper and see if I can stiffen that up, and then more than likely, most definitely going to be putting some heat into this with the shrinking tool. So it's stiffened up a bit, there's still a little bit of flex in here, but there's something poking against this here, so a bit of inner frame bit of inner frame or something like that there, because it's butting up against it when I push it in. But just a little bit here. I'm going to do a little bit more with the shrinking with a flipper, and then I'm going to put some heat into this, because it does feel a little bit low in places, a little bit high, but I need to shrink it a bit before I do any more pulling. But I'll just give this a little bit more time and see what we're left with. Almost got it.
Did it stop popping?
Yeah. Oh, a little bit.
You shrunk it?
No, but the flippers helped.
You sure it's that as well? All buttoned up. All buttoned up now.
Done, is it?
Yeah.
Right, you'll be able to give it a quick polish and clean it up.
So done a little bit of heat shrinking there, stiffen that panel up, a little bit more pulling. I'm not showing every little bit that I've pulled and all the rest of it. So now we're just knocking off the little, the little high spots that the puller can create. The flipper does a good job at that, of like linishing down any of them little tiny high spots of metal. And I'll just run a P60 grit grinder over it. Like I say, I don't want to try and take too much metal off of it. I'll be a bit careful. And yeah, just take that down and then get it all DA'd now, get it all feathered out around it, and get some filler in it. Can use a file. I do like using a file. I don't use it that often. I've got a file, but the blade's blunt on it, and I've never ever replaced it. So I just linish it off with with a P60 grit on on the grinder wheel, and just take a bit of that spiky metal off of it. And now sand it. So I sand around the repair with 120 grit normally. Most repairs sand all the paint around it. Try and feather that transition out from your grinding marks and your paint layers. Get that bit feathered out. Run over the metal as well with the 120 grit, and then get it all blown off. Get it degreased. Get that metal lovely and clean, and get some filler straight in it. So filler I'm using is Evercoat Rage Gold. It's what I use for sort of the bulkier repairs, and I knock all that filler down with 80 grit. I do all the rubbing down with 80 grit initially until I'm almost there with my shape. And the first skim of filler, I like to sort of try and spread it in a bit tight. You want to just put a first layer on with this filler, especially get that first layer on, so it sort of just wets it up a little bit, almost like you're sort of scraping it off slightly. You can sort of try and whop a big bit of filler in there initially, and try and get some lows, but I sort of just try and put a thinner layer really, and I'm expecting there's some lower bits, especially around that heat shrunk area where it's popping in and out. You've got to draw a line at it somewhere and say, well, that is a little bit deeper than other places, but we'll get that with the filler now. So I get that first skim in there, not too bulky. I like it almost like a scraped in coat in a way. Get that scraped in, and like I say, with wetting up the filler, sort of getting it on there and sort of taking it off a little bit initially, it sort of gives it a good bit of grab onto the metal as well, and I transition into the paint. So I just knock the first coat off with 80 grit. Any high spots like that I see, give them a little bit of a tap in. You got a little bit more rigidness in the panel with a bit of filler holding it there. Yeah, like I say, just get it all off with 80 grit. I haven't sort of scribed my line in, so I'm just doing it by eye at the moment, getting the feature line in. A little bit of an awkward shape, that one, because as it comes down the wheel arch towards the door, it then curves around, so it's no true flat panels. You've got the radius, the curve of the top of the wheel arch, then the flatness of the bottom edge of the wheel arch. So I'm just sort of getting that in by eye at the moment. Get it somewhere handy in that first skim. That's sort of like, that's my foundation, that first skim. Again, feeling for lows and highs, so I know where there's some bit more problematic areas, and then I've sort of put the line in with the scribe tool and get some tape on there and just get my first profile in, really, at the distance it should be, the shape it should be. You can sometimes you can just get that in by eye without sort of taping it, but I want to sort of try and get that feature line looking a bit even on that first skim, so that's sort of a guide for me then for my second skim, to follow that line when I'm putting the filler in. And pretty much got the bulk of it in that first skim. Like I say, if you don't put too much in, you don't try and lump it all in there in one go, it's not too much rubbing then. And I will do this feature line, I will tape either side of it as I go. So just getting a bit of tape residue off there, make sure you get all that filler blown out. And I repeated the same process there. I'm not showing it because my videos are long enough as they are, and I want to try and keep your attention span as long as possible. So I done another skim of gold, got it there, and I left it in 80 grit instead of trying to refine the scratches out in 80 grit, and there might be the odd pinhole, which some of the bulkier type fillers a bit more prone to it. Like I say, skimming in tight and spreading tight when you're mixing is going to reduce the amount of air pockets that you might trap in there. So yeah, another skim of gold on there, got the shape to almost where I wanted in 80 grit. And then there's two ways I go about it after that. I either give it a skim of that, the finer Rage Ultra, which is, can fill quite big discrepancies. So if there was some bigger discrepancies in it, I would use that as a finishing coat. But the shape was there. I had no real bad highs or no real bad lows that I needed to fill. So I give that a coat of glaze. So I can do my refining work now in this finer greys, straight over the 80 grit, go a bit beyond the repair, beyond the filler, bit more into the paint. And I'm just knocking this straight off now. The glaze rubs easy with 180 grit. The only thing with the glaze is, well, this Evercoat one, Dolphin glaze is a bit like it as well. They do have quite a greasy film. So I just use a couple of old bits of 180 just to break through that bit of resin film that's on there, just to break through that. And once you're through that, it flies off. So straight in with 180 grit now on the glaze that I've put on there. Get the shape and the line in by hand, as to where I think it's nearly there. The transitions are almost there. Want to leave a little bit of meat on the bone for if you want to finish off a little bit finer, which I did on this. I finished off in 220 grit. So now I know I'm almost there. Everything's feeling good shape wise. Wobbles and lows and that are not really there now, and it's just a bit of refining the feature line, and getting the scratch to a 220 grit now. So again, scribe that line in, get some tape on it. Tape is a real help for getting wheel arches and profiles and feature lines in. Tape is a real big help. Get some guide coat on there, so I know I'm getting me 180 scratches out as well. And yeah, just repeat the process. Carry on as I was. I bring the top. I always normally on wheel arches I bring the top in first, and then bring the bottom in. The lower side of that wheel arch. Bring that in at the end. So I'll tape it for the top. So I've got my line for the top. If I can't see the scribe line or any guide coat line, I will put another line in and then tape on the other side of it, and bring the bottom line in, and leave that sharper than what it should be. So I hope you enjoyed this subject matter of this video about feeling levels and visualizing how a panel and a repair will look with your hand. You've got to look at it with your hand, not just your eyes. And it helps you out if you're just learning, or you're trying to do this for yourself. Get that hand trained, get that hand feeling discrepancies, and it will help you out no end. It's essential.
Right then, YouTube, that's the van all repaired now. So I'll give you a quick look, and yeah, it's all come out okay. Little repair up there, which I didn't really film that, so it's a bit difficult with the camera going up there. So with this video, I'll show you how to sort of manipulate the metal out using a puller. They're really handy for any of you people that are just doing it part-time or just doing stuff for yourself. The DIYers, they're worth their weight in gold, those pullers. Again, for commercial vehicles, when you have it's hard to get access to the inside, and a lot of panels do have. It is difficult to get on the insides of them and get it exactly where you need it. If you want to push from behind or hammer from behind, you could always struggle to swing in there. And if you wanted to hammer and dolly this, it's almost impossible unless there's two of you to get in with a dolly on one side. Some of this arch, always try to find accesses. There's always places that you may be able to get somewhere in and maybe just push with screwdrivers or poke stuff out, backs of hammers, edges of hammers. You use your initiative, you use your imagination. You want to try to avoid stretching, so not like just big dent and just go wallop and try and push it out. You want to manipulate it and take your time. But those pullers, yes, the GYS one is a bit more of a pro level, more expensive piece of equipment, but there are a lot cheaper versions out there. And look at every dent and try to assess it. Look for your deepest parts. Every dent's got a different shape to it. They're all different every time you repair something. So try to take out some of the deepness first and then work your way round. And with that spot puller, try to, I sort of go about 1 centimetre apart as I'm pulling, and then maybe go in between those initial pulls, so you've sort of got the bulk of it out, and then try and pull in between it. Try and get the metal out as best you can. You're better off having it in a little bit to give you some scope for your filler work, and when it stretches and starts popping in and out, you need to try to heat it. I've got the heat shrinker attachment on that, but if you've got a cheaper machine that may not have that heat shrinker, maybe some sort of small blowtorch, you can just get a good bit of heat into that bit that's popping in and out. Keep it in its relaxed position, get some heat in it, let it shrink, let it cool naturally, and then you can do a bit more pulling. It's a bit stiffer then for you to do a bit more pulling. So try to sort of show you how to manipulate the metal to get it to filler stage. And the filler on this, I used the Rage Evercoat fillers. So I've got Evercoat Gold, which is like a bulkier filler, which I use on most repairs of this type. I've got the Rage Ultra, which is a finer, smoother, almost like a glaze type filler, so it's a bit of a multi-purpose. And I use the EZ glaze as well. So I find with this gold, if I've got the repair almost there in the gold, and I use 80 grit initially to knock that off, because it is quite a tough filler on a bigger area to knock off. It does go quite hard. So I do everything in 80 grit until I've got my shape there and I'm happy with the shape. And then I'll either use that Rage Ultra, give it one skim of that to then refine it to a 180 or a 240 scratch. Really don't really go any finer than that, or give it a coat of that, give it a coat of glaze. And that's what I've done on this one. Give it a coat of glaze at the end, get your feature line in, use your masking tape, use a tool to mark out your profiles. With getting the feature lines in, I highly recommend buying one of them profile tools. They're really cheap, you can buy those cheap. And if the panel you're repairing, you haven't got a line to take off, just use the panel on the opposite side to get the gap that you want, run it round the wheel arch or whatever profile you need to get that size, get that set, and then just use it on the other side, so then you know you're getting the same shape and size as it would be originally. So highly recommend one of those profile scribing tools, and also using tape to get them lines in a bit more definite. It's quite a sharpish line on this. This is one of them lines, it's quite sharp, quite difficult to get in from coming side to side. Sometimes an angle panel, you can get it in side to side and you can see it visually with guide coat and you're not rubbing out the other side. But when it's quite sharp but sort of quite faint in a way, I suppose, once you've got the line in, just use masking tape and you'll get a lovely lining with masking tape. I always keep the lines sharper than what they should be, because primer, it's gonna soften up that line a little bit, so you always bear that in mind. And then I like to get, if it's got to be a bit softer, I leave it sharper in the filler, and to get it a bit softer, I use the primer then. And I do the same with the primer, as if it's filler, maybe tape it off a little bit, keep it sharp, and then just get the shape of the profile that you want on the last initial rubbing of the primer. And with this one, it's sort of sharp in the middle, and it does go softer as it comes to the end. Try and use the footage as a guide to how you go, but I find just most of it I use 80 grit, and I finish off it's 220 grit because I'm on the 3M Cubitron strips, and they go from 180 to 220. So I finish off in 220 most of the time, but 180 is okay for 2-pack primer. If you've got your repair in 180 and you don't want to mess about with it anymore, then 180 is fine. I really wouldn't go any coarser than that. And smaller repairs you could do to 320, and I wouldn't go any finer than 320, to be honest with you, because it might lose a bit of grab for the primer. Unless you're using 1K primers, then yeah, I would finish 320, maybe a little bit finer. Just want to clear up some myths, and I do get comments on this all the time, and I see comments about this, about putting filler onto bare metal. There's a couple of scenarios where you can put filler onto bare metal, and I wouldn't recommend putting filler onto bare metal. Something like this, it's accident damage, there's no corrosion, the metal's clean, there's no issue at all. The filler's designed to go onto bare metal and to go into paintwork. It can go into both. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't put it into paint. It should be all over bare metal. It should be on top of epoxy, primer, and all these types of, I'd say, misleading information, really. Like I say, it depends on the situation of the repair, really. Filler is fine to go on bare metal, but that bare metal needs to be squeaky clean, no corrosion in it. You're not filling in corrosion or anything like that, and it needs to go on there straight away. So literally, especially in the colder, damper months, or your garage is damp, that moisture is going to start attacking that bare metal straight away. At a microscopic level it will. So if you've just bare metaled that and you're ready for filler, it needs to be degreased, squeaky clean, and there's no problem with putting filler on it straight away. Even after an hour of leaving something bare metal, I wouldn't recommend putting it on there. So if you know you're going to be putting filler on straight away and you're going to be rubbing it all in that same time, in the summer months when it's drier, it's not so much of an issue. Then there's no problem at all with putting filler onto bare metal and into paint. I like to put it in between, you know, between it, because you'll have paint ridges, especially if something's had previous paint and you've got a few more paint layers. That transition from metal to paint is more seamless, and then your primer hasn't got so much work to do then. We're trying to fill some variations in levels. If it's a restoration type of work or custom work and you're bare metaling a whole panel and there's filler repairs to do on it, one, I would recommend putting epoxy on there because it gives it a bit of sheen and you can see where you need to do your filler. And two, if the metal's old and it's had previous work and there's some rust pitting and all of that, and you've cleaned it as best you can, why wheeled out any pits and all that, then 100% put epoxy on it, a good 2-pack epoxy, and then just give that a key and put filler on it. Try not to break through. You are going to get breakthroughs, but then you want to be doing that filler work, you know, the applications one after another. If you get to a stage where it's not ready for primer, you've put epoxy on, you've done filler work, and you've got little bare metal spots showing, then again, put some epoxy on that. If it's going to be left for a period of time, or you've got damp conditions, which you will have in workshops and garages, especially in the winter months in the UK, then yeah, I would definitely say use epoxy. So they're the situations where I would put epoxy on a job for filler before I put filler on. But this type of work, crush repair, new modern vehicles, you've took off original paint and you've exposed bare metal, not a problem putting filler onto bare metal. So that's how I would do it. People might agree with me and some people might disagree with me that you should be putting epoxy over everything, but I've worked in crash repair for a good bulk of my career. I've been doing it for 30 years and there's not one body shop, apart from restoration and old panels, where I've not seen any of the panel beaters I work. I've worked with a lot of panel beaters, real high-end skilled panel beaters, and I've never seen, they've never come up the paint shop and said we need epoxy primer on this before we start filling the repairs. It's never been a situation. The only time this has been a situation is when I've done restoration work and worked in restoration places, that vehicle's going to be all bare metal, that the whole vehicle will want epoxy on it. So there's the two scenarios really. Crush repair, like I say, that filler needs to go on straight away before any moisture starts attacking that. And if it's being left, you know, if you've done your filler work but you're not priming it, I recommend at least putting a barrier coat of epoxy over it until you're going to be, you know, doing maybe another stage of filler work. So that's my take on whether you should put filler on bare metal or not, and whether it should have epoxy on it. So that's the repair stage done. I hope you found the information in this useful and as a guide. The next stage of this job is going to be prepping this out now for primer and paint. Get it in primer and get it up to the painting stage. So that be in the next video, so look out for that video when it comes out. Thanks for watching, really appreciate it. If you like my content, please help my channel to grow by subscribing, sharing and liking the video. And yeah, we'll see you again in the next one. Look after yourselves. Cheers.